I stared at my phone in disbelief. The text message from Mom read, "We're too tired from your sister's trip to attend your graduation. 4 years of sleepless nights, 3 jobs to pay for books, and countless sacrifices had led to this moment. Valedictorian at Harvard. And my parents wouldn't be there." I typed back 2 words. Rest well. They had no idea what they were missing. Tomorrow, the entire world would watch me speak. Little did I know how much would change once those cameras started rolling. Growing up in Portland, Maine shaped me in ways I never fully appreciated until I left. Our modest 2-story colonial sat just 3 blocks from the Atlantic, where winter winds whipped salt spray against windows, and summer brought tourists who never ventured into our working-class neighborhood. Dad worked as an accountant at a local firm. Mom taught second grade at Portland Elementary, and we were comfortable, but never wealthy. My sister Amber arrived 15 months after me, and from the beginning, we couldn't have been more different. I was the bookworm, with perpetually smudged glasses, and a backpack so heavy it made me walk with a slight forward tilt. Amber was pure kinetic energy, a blur of motion that our parents struggled to contain until they enrolled her in figure skating at age 5. The moment Amber's blade touched ice, our family dynamic shifted. Her natural grace and fearlessness caught the attention of coaches immediately. "She has Olympic potential," they whispered to my parents, whose eyes widened with possibility. Soon, our family calendar revolved around practice sessions, private coaching, and weekend competitions across New England. I don't remember exactly when I realized that my achievements had become background noise in our house. Maybe it was in 7th grade when my science fair project on alternative energy won first place statewide. Mom and Dad sent me with our neighbor because Amber had a regional competition the same weekend. "We're so proud of you," they said over the phone that night, but I could hear the arena announcer in the background. By high school, the pattern was firmly established. My perfect SAT score earned a nod and quick hug before conversation returned to Amber's new sponsorship deal with a sporting goods company. When I won the National Debate Championship, my parents watched the live stream from a hotel room in Chicago while attending Amber's qualifier. "You were amazing, Grady," Dad texted afterward. "Sorry we couldn't be there in person." I never blamed Amber. She didn't ask for the spotlight any more than I asked for my analytical mind. We shared late-night talks in our adjoining bedrooms, where she confessed the pressure sometimes felt crushing. "Mom and Dad put everything into my skating," she whispered one night when she was 15. "What if I'm not good enough? What happens to all that investment?" The Harvard acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday. Full academic scholarship. I stood in our kitchen, hands trembling as I held the prestigious letterhead. Mom walked in from grocery shopping, and I showed her with tears in my eyes. "That's wonderful, honey," she said, giving me a quick side hug. "We always knew you were smart." "Oh, did you see Amber's new costume arrived? Come look at the sequin detail." That night I cried silently into my pillow, not from sadness but from a strange, hollow resignation. The pattern wasn't going to change. I would always be the reliable one who didn't need attention, whose achievements came so easily they didn't warrant celebration. Harvard welcomed me with open arms. My triple major in economics, public policy, and computer science raised eyebrows among advisors, but I thrived on the challenge. For the first time, my intellectual hunger found a home among peers who understood the exhilaration of ideas. My roommate Julia Westbrook became the sister of my heart, staying up late helping me work through algorithm problems while I edited her political science papers. Julia's family treated me like their own. From the first parents' weekend, when my folks canceled last minute for Amber's exhibition skate. The Westbrooks took me to dinner at the best restaurant in Cambridge, asked thoughtful questions about my studies, and sent care packages with homemade cookies and handwritten notes throughout the semester. Professor Williams in the economics department became my mentor sophomore year, after I challenged one of his theories during lecture. Instead of dismissal, he invited me to his office hours and engaged me in a 2-hour debate that ended with him recommending books that contradicted his own published work. "Never stop questioning, Miss Hamilton," he said as I left. "That mind of yours is going to change the world someday." By senior year, I had published research in 2 academic journals, maintained a perfect GPA, and fielded job offers from top consulting firms and tech companies. When the dean's office notified me about being selected as valedictorian, I sat alone in my dorm room, staring at the email for 20 minutes before calling Julia. "This is huge, Grady," she squealed over the phone. "Have you told your parents yet?" "No," I admitted. "I think I'll surprise them at graduation. Maybe this time." I let the sentence hang. Julia understood without me finishing. Maybe this time they'd see me. Really see me. I mentioned graduation to my parents during our monthly calls, but kept the valedictorian news secret. They assured me they wouldn't miss it. "We've already booked flights," Dad said in March. "Nothing could keep us from your big day, kiddo." Every evening, Amber video called to chat about her upcoming European competition in Switzerland. At 19, she was at the peak of her competitive career, with sponsorships and a real shot at the next Olympic team. "I'm so excited you're graduating," she said. "First Harvard grad in the family. That's way cooler than anything I'm doing." 2 days before graduation, I was scrolling through Instagram when my thumb froze over a photo. Amber standing in front of the Matterhorn, arms around Mom and Dad, all three grinning in matching Team USA jackets. Posted 3 hours ago. My hands shook as I tapped out a message. "You're in Switzerland? What about graduation?" 20 minutes later, Mom's reply arrived. "We're too tired from your sister's trip to attend your graduation." I stared at those words until they blurred. All the moments they'd missed, all the achievements that went uncelebrated, all the times I told myself it didn't matter crashed together in my chest. The crushing realization that once again, I would walk across a stage with no family to cheer my name felt like concrete hardening around my heart. I typed back 2 words, "Rest well." Then I turned off my phone and finally allowed myself to cry. Julia found me huddled in the corner of our shared bathroom, knees pulled to my chest, breathing in hiccuping gasps. "Grady, what happened?" She knelt beside me on the cold tile floor, her hand warm on my shoulder. I held out my phone, the screen still displaying my mother's text. Julia read it, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to anger. "Those selfish." She stopped herself, wrapping her arms around me instead. "I'm so sorry, Grady. You deserve better." We stayed that way for nearly an hour, my tears soaking her Harvard sweatshirt. When I finally pulled away, Julia's jaw was set in determination. "You know what? My family is going to be your family tomorrow. My parents already think of you as their third daughter anyway. You'll have the biggest, loudest, cheering section at graduation." Her certainty was a lifeline. That night, Julia called her parents, who immediately insisted on bringing me flowers and taking graduation photos just like we'd do for our own. The next morning, I met with Dean Peterson to discuss valedictorian speech requirements. His office overlooked Harvard Yard, where workers were already setting up thousands of chairs for tomorrow's ceremony. "Keep it under 7 minutes," he advised, handing me a folder with procedural details. "The networks get antsy if we run long." I looked up sharply. "Networks?" "Oh, yes." He nodded, adjusting his glasses. "Education channels carry our ceremony live. Harvard graduation speeches tend to make the news rounds, especially with a student record as impressive as yours." I nodded, accepting the folder with suddenly trembling hands. As I stood to leave, Dean Peterson added, "Your parents must be extraordinarily proud." The comment hit like a physical blow. I managed a tight smile and mumbled something non-committal before escaping to the library. Sitting alone in a quiet corner, I pulled out my laptop and opened the speech I'd been refining for weeks. It was safe, conventional, full of gratitude and hope and generic advice about finding purpose. Nothing personal, nothing real. I stared at the screen until the words blurred, thinking about those education channels, thinking about my empty seats tomorrow, thinking about 4 years of achievement in the echo chamber of my family's indifference. The decision crystallized suddenly and completely. I closed the document without saving changes and opened a blank page. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for only a moment before they began to fly. The words poured out raw and honest. No bitterness, but no sugarcoating either. I wrote about working 3 campus jobs while maintaining perfect grades, about celebrating achievements alone, About finding family among friends and mentors when biology failed me. About the strength that comes from building yourself without a foundation. 3 hours later, I sat back, exhausted but oddly peaceful. The speech before me wasn't angry or vengeful. It was simply true. And for the first time, I felt no need to apologize for my truth. Julia read it that evening, her eyes widening. "Grady, this is powerful. But are you sure? There's no taking this back once you say it on stage." "I'm sure," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "I've been invisible to them for 22 years. Maybe it's time they see me, even if it's through a television screen." Professor Williams agreed to review my speech over coffee the next morning. He read it twice, nodding slowly. "This takes courage," he said finally. "But courage is exactly what makes a speech memorable. I would suggest softening this paragraph here, not to dilute your message, but to ensure the audience stays with you emotionally." I made his suggested edits, then practiced in the empty auditorium that afternoon. My voice echoed off the walls, and unexpected tears sprang to my eyes during the final lines. This wasn't just a graduation speech anymore. It was a declaration of independence. That evening, Julia's family took me to dinner at an elegant restaurant overlooking the Charles River. Mrs. Westbrook presented me with a beautiful pearl necklace for tomorrow's ceremony, while Mr. Day Westbrook gave me a fountain pen engraved with my initials. "For signing all those important documents in your bright future," he said with a wink. Back in our dorm, I made one final attempt to call my parents. The call went straight to voicemail, international roaming, probably disabled to save money. I didn't leave a message. As I laid out my graduation robe and cap, a wave of panic washed over me. What was I thinking? This speech would burn bridges. It would create family drama that could last years. Maybe I should revert to the safe version. I sat on my bed, heart pounding, and closed my eyes. The image that came to mind wasn't of my parents' potential reaction, but of all the students who would sit in that audience tomorrow feeling unseen, unworthy, uncelebrated by those who should love them most. Maybe my words could reach them where they sat, anonymous in their caps and gowns. I took a deep breath and tucked my speech into my graduation folder. Tomorrow, I would speak my truth, regardless of the consequences. The morning of graduation dawned clear and perfect, as if Harvard had ordered ideal weather along with the catering. Julia and I followed our graduation preparation ritual. Avocado toast at our favorite cafe, final makeup checks, and silly photos in our dorm wearing graduation caps at ridiculous angles. "Ready to make history?" Julia asked, straightening my honors cords. "Ready to stop hiding," I replied, surprised by the calm certainty in my voice. Harvard Yard transformed into a sea of crimson as thousands of graduates and their families gathered under the massive white tents. The energy was electric laughter, camera flashes, champagne corks popping despite the official prohibition. Everywhere I looked, proud parents embraced their children, grandparents wiped away tears, siblings teased and celebrated. The Westbrooks found us near the registration tables, Mrs. Westbrook immediately pulling me into a warm hug. "We are so proud of you, Grady," she whispered, pressing a beautiful bouquet of white roses into my hands. Valedictorian. What an achievement. Mr. Westbrook handed me a card signed by their entire family, including Julia's brothers who couldn't attend. "Your intelligence is matched only by your character," the message read. "We're honored to share this day with you." The lump in my throat made it difficult to thank them properly. These people owed me nothing, yet treated me with the loving support my own parents had consistently withheld. As valedictorian, I was directed backstage 45 minutes before the ceremony began. Professors in academic regalia milled about, adjusting hoods and catching up with colleagues. Professor Williams found me sitting alone, nervously reviewing my speech cards. "Remember to breathe," he advised, squeezing my shoulder gently. "Your words matter, Miss Hamilton. They're going to land exactly where they need to." Dean Peterson reviewed the ceremony order with me one final time. "After my introduction, you'll have about 7 minutes. The red light on the podium blinks when you have 1 minute remaining." He glanced at his program notes. I'll be highlighting your triple major, perfect GPA, published research, and the fact that you worked 3 jobs throughout your Harvard career. Quite remarkable. I nodded, throat suddenly dry. The achievement sounded impressive when listed that way impossible, even. Yet nobody who should have been most impressed would be sitting in the audience today. The ceremony began precisely on schedule. Honorary degrees, musical performances, and administrative speeches proceeded efficiently. Then Dean Peterson stepped forward to introduce me, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. Harvard's tradition of academic excellence finds its purest expression in students, who not only excel intellectually, but demonstrate exceptional character. Today's valedictorian exemplifies both qualities in abundance. He detailed my academic record, emphasizing the obstacles I'd overcome and contributions I'd made to university research. As he spoke, I focused on my breathing, aware of the television cameras positioned at strategic points around the stage. It is my great honor to introduce this year's valedictorian, Miss Grady Hamilton. The applause washed over me as I walked to the podium, my heart pounding so hard I feared the microphone might pick it up. 15,000 faces looked back at me, a blur of expectant expressions waiting for wisdom, or at least brevity. I placed my speech cards on the podium and took a deep breath. The first words came out steady and clear. Thank you, Dean Peterson, faculty, fellow graduates, and families. Today marks not just the culmination of our academic journey, but the beginning of applying what we've learned to the world beyond these hallowed walls. Standard opening. Safe harbor before venturing into uncharted waters. Harvard teaches many lessons, but perhaps the most valuable one I learned here wasn't in any classroom. It was the discovery that family isn't always defined by blood. I paused, feeling the subtle shift in the audience's attention. 4 years ago, I arrived at Harvard with perfect grades, big dreams, and a quiet certainty that achievement equaled worth. If I could just accomplish enough, win enough, excel enough, then surely I would matter. My voice stayed steady as I continued. Throughout my time here, I worked 3 campus jobs while maintaining my studies. I spent holidays alone in nearly empty dorms. I celebrated achievements in the echo chamber of my own approval. Not because I wanted to, but because the seats meant for my family remained consistently empty. The audience had gone completely still. In my peripheral vision, I could see a camera operator adjusting his angle to capture my expression more clearly. What I couldn't understand then was that their absence wasn't a reflection of my value, but of priorities I couldn't control. What I didn't yet know was that sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family that helps you become who you're meant to be. I gestured toward the audience, where Julia and the Westbrooks sat beaming up at me. Harvard became my home because of the family I found here. Roommates who held me when I cried. Professors who challenged me to think beyond textbooks. Staff members who remembered my name and asked how I was doing and actually waited for the answer. My voice grew stronger, more confident. Today, as I look out at this sea of crimson, I see many empty seats. Not just mine, but others. Some of you sit alone today for reasons similar to mine. Some due to distance, finances, illness, death, or estrangement. To you especially, I want to say, you are not defined by those empty seats. You are defined by the strength it took to keep walking when no one was watching, to keep achieving when no one was applauding. I looked directly into the nearest camera, knowing my parents might eventually see this moment. The truth I've learned at Harvard is that validation is wonderful, but not essential. Recognition is gratifying, but not necessary. What's essential is knowing your own worth, even when others miss it. What's necessary is continuing to shine, even when no one seems to notice your light. My voice softened for the conclusion. Today, my biological family couldn't be here, but when I look into the audience, I don't see empty seats. I see the family that chose me, the mentors who believed in me, the friends who became siblings of the heart, and I am overwhelmed with gratitude for this unexpected blessing. The discovery that family can be found in the most surprising places, when we have the courage to open our hearts. I paused, taking in the absolute silence that had fallen over Harvard Yard. To my fellow graduates, I offer this final thought. Build your life on the foundation of your own strength. Celebrate your achievements, even when no one else does. And never underestimate your capacity to become someone else's chosen family along the way. Congratulations, class of 2025. I can't wait to see what we all become. For 3 heartbeats after I finished, the silence held. Then, like a wave crashing to shore, the applause began. It rose and swelled until people were standing, the sound thunderous across Harvard Yard. 15,000 people on their feet, many wiping tears. In a daze, I returned to my seat, hands trembling. The remainder of the ceremony passed in a blur. When it ended, I was immediately surrounded by fellow graduates offering hugs and sharing their own stories of family disappointment. A distinguished woman, with silver hair cut through the crowd, hand extended. "Margaret Foster, class of '92, she said, her grip firm. That was the most authentic valedictorian speech I've heard in 30 years of attending these ceremonies. I recognized her name immediately. CEO of Foster Technologies, and one of Harvard's most successful alumni. Thank you, I managed, still overwhelmed by the response. I'm expanding my education technology division in San Francisco, she continued, handing me a business card. We need voices like yours. Call my office Monday if you're interested in joining us. Dean Peterson appeared at my elbow. Miss Hamilton, exceptional speech. Truly moving. Just so you know, it's already trending online. He looked simultaneously impressed and slightly concerned. The Media Relations Office has received several interview requests for you. I nodded, unable to form coherent responses as more people pressed forward with congratulations. Eventually, Julia extracted me from the crowd, leading me to where her parents waited with more hugs and tears. Your speech was beautiful, Grady, Mrs. Westbrook said, eyes glistening. So brave and honest. I checked my phone for the first time since that morning. Hundreds of notifications flashed across the screen. Messages, tags, shares, and nothing from my parents. With a decisive tap, I turned the phone off again. I don't want to deal with any of that right now, I told Julia. Today isn't about them. We celebrated with dinner at the best restaurant in Cambridge, joined by Professor Williams, who toasted my extraordinary courage and eloquence. The surreal feeling persisted throughout the evening. I had spoken my truth publicly for the first time, and the world had not only listened, but applauded. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in years, unburdened by the weight of silence I'd carried for so long. Morning light filtered through my dorm room curtains as I finally turned my phone back on. It immediately began buzzing with such intensity that I nearly dropped it. 2,000 email notifications, 800 text messages, thousands of social media tags and comments, dozens of missed calls, including 12 from my mother and 9 from my father. Holy crap, Julia whispered, looking over my shoulder. You've gone viral. While I had slept, my speech had exploded online. Clips were being shared across every platform, with my final lines about empty seats and chosen family becoming a rallying cry for thousands of commenters, sharing their own stories of family disappointment and resilience. Good Morning America, Today Show, and 3 major networks had left messages requesting interviews. Harvard's Media Relations Office sent an urgent email asking how they should direct the unprecedented volume of media inquiries. Most overwhelming were the direct messages, thousands of students describing how my words had given voice to their own experiences. I watched your speech and finally felt seen, wrote one. I'm walking at my graduation next week with no family there. You gave me courage to hold my head high. As I scrolled through the tsunami of responses, my phone rang. Amber's name appeared on the screen. I hesitated, then answered, Grady? Her voice sounded small, tear-choked. I saw your speech. You did? We all did. It was playing on the hotel TV in Switzerland when we got back from my competition. Mom and Dad. They're pretty upset. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch between us. I didn't know, Amber continued, her voice breaking. I mean, I knew they focused a lot on my skating, but I never realized how much they missed, how much you accomplished on your own. Valedictorian at Harvard, Grady. That's incredible. Thanks, I said, my voice neutral. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I've been thinking about it all night. All those times they dropped everything for my competitions while you were achieving amazing things completely on your own. It wasn't fair. The genuine remorse in her voice softened something in my chest. It wasn't your fault, Amber. Maybe not directly, but I benefited from it. I should have noticed. I should have said something. We talked for nearly an hour. Amber explained that our parents had watched the entire speech in shocked silence, then immediately tried calling me. They'd been calling constantly since. "They're flying home today," she said. "They want to talk to you." "I'm not ready for that," I replied honestly. "I need time to process everything." After we hung up, Julia helped me sort through the most important messages and craft a simple statement, thanking people for their support. By noon, several major news sites had published articles about the speech, with headlines like "Harvard valedictorian's honest speech about absent parents goes viral and empty seats," "Full heart," "Graduate's message resonates with thousands." That afternoon, I met with Margaret Foster at her hotel to discuss the job opportunity at Foster Technologies. "We're developing platforms to make quality education accessible to underserved communities," she explained over coffee. "Your perspective would be invaluable to our team. Plus, your computer science and policy background is exactly what we need." The San Francisco position came with a generous salary, relocation package, and work that aligned perfectly with my values. I promised to consider it seriously. By evening, a debate had erupted online about whether I should have aired family laundry in such a public forum. While the overwhelming majority supported my honesty, some commenters criticized what they saw as public shaming of my parents. "You don't owe anyone an explanation," Julia insisted as we scrolled through the comments. "You told your truth without attacking them. That's all anyone can ask." The next morning, I agreed to one interview with a national morning show, emphasizing the positive message about found family rather than parental neglect. The interviewer seemed disappointed by my refusal to disparage my parents, but the segment generated another wave of supportive messages. A prominent newspaper published a profile of my academic journey, highlighting the triple major and 3 jobs I'd maintained throughout college. The reporter had interviewed Professor Williams, who called me one of the most intellectually gifted and genuinely determined students I've encountered in 30 years of teaching. Through it all, my parents continued calling. After 3 days, I finally texted my mother. "I'm not ready to talk yet. I need space to process everything. I'll reach out when I'm ready." Her immediate response, "We deserve a chance to explain," only reinforced my decision to maintain distance. Julia, ever my protector, helped me develop clear boundaries for any eventual conversation with my family. "You need to approach this from a position of strength," she advised. "Not anger, not hurt, but with the same clarity and honesty you showed in your speech." As graduation week ended and most students departed campus, I faced a difficult decision about the Foster Technologies job. Taking it meant moving across the country, putting 3,000 miles between me and any possibility of family reconciliation. Staying nearer to Maine might facilitate healing, but at what cost to my career and independence? After much reflection, I decided that building my future couldn't be secondary to repairing the past. I called Margaret Foster and accepted the position, with a start date 1 month after graduation. That night, after Julia had fallen asleep, I stood at our dorm window looking out at the campus that had become more home to me than my actual home ever was. The viral fame would fade, but the truth I'd spoken would remain. Whatever came next with my family, I would face it as the person Harvard had helped me, become someone who finally understood her own worth. 1 week after graduation, I agreed to meet my parents at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant near Boston Common. Julia offered to wait nearby in case you need extraction, but this was a conversation I needed to have alone. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a corner table with good sightlines to the exit. When my parents walked in, the sight of them hit me harder than expected. Mom looked like she hadn't slept in days, her normally perfect hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Dad had lost weight, his suit hanging loosely on his frame. They spotted me, and froze momentarily before approaching with uncertain smiles. "Grady," Mom said, her voice wavering. She moved as if to hug me, but stopped when I didn't rise from my seat. "Thanks for agreeing to meet us," Dad said as they settled into their chairs. An awkward silence descended as we studied our menus with unnecessary intensity. After we ordered, Mom reached across the table toward my hand, but withdrew when I didn't reciprocate. Your speech was, she began. Accurate, I finished for her. Dad cleared his throat. We know we've made mistakes, Grady. But that speech made it sound like we never cared about your achievements, and that's simply not true. Isn't it? I kept my voice level. Name 3 academic awards I won in high school. They exchanged glances. You were on the honor roll, Mom offered. Every semester. That's 1. What else? The silence that followed provided its own answer. You were valedictorian of your high school too, Dad finally said. Yes. And you were at Amber's regional competition that weekend. You watched my speech on a live stream from your hotel room. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We're proud of you, Grady. We always have been. You just make everything look so easy. You never seem to need our support the way Amber did. I didn't need it less. I just stopped asking for it after being disappointed too many times. Dad's jaw tightened. That's not fair. We did our best with both of you. Your best included missing every major milestone in my academic career. Your best meant I worked 3 jobs at Harvard while you spent thousands on Amber's coaches. Your best left me celebrating being named valedictorian alone in my dorm room. My voice remained steady, but my hands trembled slightly. I clasped them together in my lap. We thought the Harvard scholarship covered everything, Mom said defensively. Tuition and basic room and board. Not books, not supplies, not flights home for holidays. I stopped taking because you were always at Amber's competitions. Dad's face flushed red. You have no idea the sacrifices we've made for this family. You think we enjoyed missing your events? You think we didn't want to be at your graduation? Then why weren't you? I asked, simply. Because we're drowning, he exploded, loud enough that nearby diners turned to stare. Mom placed a restraining hand on his arm as he continued in a harsh whisper. We're completely underwater financially. Have been for years. Amber's skating costs over $40,000 annually. Coaching, travel, costumes, ice time. It's bankrupted us. I stared at him in shock. What are you talking about? Dad's shoulders slumped. I lost my job 18 months ago. The accounting firm downsized. I've been doing freelance work, driving Uber at night, anything to keep Amber's career alive. Why didn't you tell me? Tell our Harvard-educated daughter that her father can't even keep a steady job? That we had to take a second mortgage on the house? That we've maxed out 5 credit cards? Mom wiped away tears. We went to Switzerland because Amber had meetings with potential sponsors who might cover her Olympic training costs. We couldn't afford the extra flights to your graduation when we were already in Europe. We barely afforded the flights to Switzerland. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All this time, I'd assumed their absence was due to indifference, not desperation. Why focus everything on Amber's skating? Why not tell her it wasn't sustainable? Mom looked down at her hands. Because I see myself in you, Grady. The academic achievements, the self-sufficiency, the ability to succeed no matter what. And I see myself in Amber too, the dreams I gave up. What dreams? I was a figure skater too. Not at Amber's level, but with potential. My parents couldn't afford the training, so I quit at 16. I went to community college instead, became a teacher because it was practical. I never wanted Amber to give up her dreams the way I had to. So you sacrificed my relationship with you for her career? We didn't see it that way, Dad insisted. You were always so capable, so independent. We thought you understood. I understood that I was never the priority, I said quietly. That my achievements didn't merit the same attention or investment as Amber's. That's not true, Mom protested. We love you both equally. We just expressed it differently. Our food arrived, creating a welcome pause in the conversation. We ate in silence for several minutes, each processing the revelations. I'm not ready to forgive you, I finally said. I appreciate knowing the financial situation, but that doesn't erase years of feeling invisible. Dad nodded slowly. We don't expect immediate forgiveness, but we want a chance to rebuild our relationship, to do better. That would require real change, not just regret, I replied. I can't keep accepting scraps of attention and convincing myself it's enough. Mom reached for my hand again, and this time I didn't pull away. "We've started marriage counseling," she said. The speech. It forced us to confront things we'd been avoiding. How we've damaged our relationship with you. How we've put unhealthy pressure on Amber. "We want to try family therapy too," Dad added. "If you're willing." I studied their faces, seeing genuine remorse alongside exhaustion and fear. The anger I'd carried for so long had no easy target anymore. They hadn't neglected me out of malice, but from a complex tangle of financial desperation, misplaced priorities, and their own unresolved issues. "I can't promise anything," I said finally, "but I'm willing to try therapy. Not right away. I need some time first." Relief washed over their faces. As we finished our meal, the conversation shifted to lighter topics: my new job in San Francisco, Amber's plans for the coming year. Nothing was resolved, but a door had been opened that had long been closed. When we parted outside the restaurant, Mom hugged me briefly. "We're so proud of you, Grady. I know those words can't make up for all the times we failed to show it, but they're true." I nodded, not quite ready to return the sentiment, but no longer feeling the burning need to escape their presence. Walking back to campus, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: sadness for the years of connection we'd lost, cautious hope for what might be rebuilt, and a new understanding of how parents can fail their children, even with the best intentions. The family's financial struggles didn't excuse their emotional neglect, but they provided context I'd never considered. The path forward would be complicated, but for the first time in years, I believed there might actually be one. San Francisco greeted me with fog and promise. 1 month later, Foster Technologies occupied the top 10 floors of a sleek downtown building with panoramic views of the bay. My new apartment in Russian Hill came as part of the relocation package, small but modern, with a bay window perfect for morning coffee and evening reflection. Margaret Foster personally introduced me to the Education Access team on my first day. Grady brings a unique perspective that will help us design platforms for students who lack traditional support systems. She explained to the group of engineers, educators, and policy experts gathered in the conference room. My role developing algorithms to identify and support at-risk students felt tailor-made for my background. For the first time, my personal experience with parental neglect became an asset rather than a wound to hide. I could speak authentically about what intervention might have helped someone like me, someone achieving on paper but struggling emotionally. The public interest in my story continued, though at a more manageable level. Several education publications requested interviews about my views on academic support systems. I wrote an opinion piece for a major newspaper about redefining success beyond parental approval. A podcast popular with college students featured a 30-minute discussion about finding mentors when family support is lacking. With each public engagement, I grew more comfortable owning my narrative without anger or bitterness. The emails continued to arrive daily, students sharing their own stories of family disappointment and finding strength in my words. Meanwhile, my relationship with my family entered a new, cautious phase. Text messages with my parents became a regular occurrence, though I carefully maintained emotional boundaries. They shared updates about their financial situation, slowly improving after Dad found a new accounting position, and their therapy progress, challenging but necessary. Amber and I video called weekly, our relationship evolving into something more balanced and honest. One evening, she surprised me with a confession. "I'm thinking about taking a break from skating," she said, nervously twisting her hair around one finger. "A childhood habit I hadn't seen in years." "Really? Is this because of what happened with my graduation?" She shook her head. "Not entirely, though that was part of it. The truth is, I'm not sure I love skating anymore. I'm not sure I ever did, at least not the way Mom loves it for me." "What would you do instead?" "I've been looking at colleges," she admitted. "Real academic programs, not just the online classes I've been taking while training. Maybe even applying to Boston University." The irony wasn't lost on either of us, Amber considering academia, while I built a career leveraging my academic success. "Whatever you decide," I told her, "make sure it's what you want, not what you think will please Mom and Dad." "That's what I'm trying to figure out," she replied. "For the first time, I'm asking myself what I actually want, not what everyone expects me to want." 3 months into my new job, A thick envelope arrived from Maine. Inside was a handwritten letter from my parents, 12 pages of painful self-reflection, apologies, and hopes for reconciliation. They acknowledged specific moments when they'd failed me, times when they'd prioritized Amber's skating over my equally important achievements. "We didn't see how our actions were sending the message that your success mattered less," Mom wrote. "We took your strength for granted instead of nurturing it. We are deeply sorry for the pain we caused." The letter concluded with a request rather than a demand. "When you feel ready, we would like to try family therapy together. We found a counselor who specializes in family reconciliation, who can work with us remotely." I read the letter 3 times, surprising myself by crying during the 3rd reading. The tears weren't from the old pain, but from recognition of the effort. This letter represented the willingness to acknowledge harm without defensiveness. That weekend, I agreed to their suggestion of family therapy. Our first session via video conference was awkward and emotionally draining. The therapist, Dr. Walters, had a direct approach that prevented anyone from hiding behind politeness or deflection. "Grady," she said early in the session, "what do you need from your parents that you haven't received?" "Acknowledgement," I answered without hesitation. "Real acknowledgement of my achievements and sacrifices. Not just words, but actions that show they value my path as much as Amber's." The question to my parents was equally direct. "What prevented you from celebrating Grady's successes with the same enthusiasm you showed for Amber's?" Their honest wrestling with that question revealing layers of financial anxiety, unresolved dreams, gender expectations, and misguided assumptions about which child needed them. More laid groundwork for genuine understanding. We agreed to continue weekly sessions, a commitment we all approached with varying degrees of hope and trepidation. Meanwhile, Margaret Foster had become more than a boss. She was the mentor I'd always craved. Our weekly strategy meetings often evolved into discussions about leadership, resilience, and authentic success. Her support was different from Professor Williams' more personal, more attuned to the emotional aspects of professional growth. "I watched your graduation speech a dozen times," she admitted during one of our coffee meetings. "It resonated with me because I lived it too. My parents never understood my ambition. They wanted me to be a teacher in our small town, marry the local bank manager, and live 3 blocks from them forever. How did you handle their disappointment?" I asked. "Not as gracefully as you," she laughed. "I ran away at 18 and barely spoke to them for a decade. Eventually, we found a middle ground, but we lost years we could have had together. That's why I wanted you on our team, Grady. You found a way to speak your truth without burning every bridge behind you." 6 months into my San Francisco life, I received an unexpected invitation to give a TED Talk about resilience and authentic success. The preparation process forced me to examine my family dynamics even more deeply, to find universal truths in my specific experience. As I worked on the talk, Amber called with news. "I got accepted to Boston University. Full academic scholarship. That's amazing. Congratulations." I still can't believe it. Mom and Dad are actually supportive cautiously, but still. Dad says the financial pressure has been crushing him for years. "How do you feel about stepping away from skating?" Terrified, relieved, excited. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I bought a plane ticket to visit you next week. Is that okay? I've never been to San Francisco." Amber's visit marked a turning point in our relationship. Without our parents as intermediaries and without the pressure of her skating career hanging over every conversation, we discovered we actually liked each other as adults. We spent a weekend exploring the city, talking more honestly than we ever had about our childhood, our parents, and our futures. On her last night, sitting on my tiny balcony watching the fog roll in, Amber made a confession. "I was always jealous of you," she said quietly. "Of me? Why would you be jealous of me when you had their complete attention?" "Because you had their respect. They worried about me constantly, micromanaged every aspect of my training and diet. But they trusted you completely. They knew you'd succeed at whatever you attempted. With me, they were never sure." Her perspective stunned me. I'd never considered my parents' emotional distance might have contained elements of confidence rather than just neglect. "I think we were both hurt by their approach," I said finally. "Just in different ways." When Amber left, Our sibling bond had been transformed from competition to alliance. We were finally on the same team, supporting each other's distinct paths rather than comparing them. As the date for my TED Talk approached, my parents asked if they could attend in person. The request triggered a complex mix of emotions: apprehension about their presence during such a vulnerable moment, but also recognition of the gesture's significance. After discussing it in therapy, I decided to extend the invitation. "It won't be easy for me to have you there," I told them honestly, "but it feels like an important step for all of us." Their grateful response, followed by immediate travel arrangements, suggested they understood the weight of the invitation. This would be the first time they'd witness one of my achievements in person since high school. The night before they arrived in San Francisco, I stood in my apartment, making final adjustments to my talk. The journey from Harvard stage to the TED stage had been unexpected, but somehow fitting. In both venues, I would speak my truth. But this time, my parents would be listening in person, rather than through a viral video. This time, they had chosen to be there. The TED conference bustled with energy as attendees networked during the pre-session breakfast. Backstage, I paced the green room, periodically checking my phone for updates from my parents. They had landed safely the night before and stayed in a hotel nearby. Nervous? A production assistant appeared with a bottle of water and a reassuring smile. Terrified, I admitted, but ready. My talk was scheduled third in the morning lineup. Through the monitor, I watched the first two speakers, a climate scientist and an architect, deliver polished presentations to enthusiastic applause. Then the host announced my name, and the familiar surge of adrenaline propelled me forward. As I walked onto the stage, the spotlight momentarily blinded me. When my vision adjusted, I scanned the audience, immediately locating my parents and Amber in the fifth row. The sight of them, actually there, watching with expressions of nervous pride, created a lump in my throat I hadn't anticipated. I took a deep breath and began. 2 years ago, I stood on another stage as Harvard's valedictorian with empty seats where my family should have been. Today, I stand before you with those seats filled, which tells a different story, one about the messy, imperfect process of healing and reconnection. For the next 18 minutes, I spoke about resilience, not as an individual achievement, but as a relational process. How my parents' absence had forced me to build inner strength. How speaking that truth publicly had catalyzed painful but necessary conversations. And how the hardest part of resilience sometimes isn't surviving the initial wound, but having the courage to remain vulnerable enough for healing. The viral moment of my graduation speech captured a valid truth about my experience, I concluded. But it was a snapshot, not the whole story. The more complex truth is that relationships can break and still be mended. People can fail us terribly and still find ways to show up later. And sometimes the deepest healing comes not from walking away, but from the difficult work of understanding each other across the divides we've created. The standing ovation that followed felt different from Harvard's, less about my personal triumph and more about the universal resonance of imperfect reconciliation. As I exited the stage, relief and exhaustion washed over me in equal measure. In the green room, I collapsed onto a sofa, emotionally spent. 20 minutes later, after fielding congratulations from conference organizers, I emerged to find my family waiting in the hallway. The moment hung between us, weighted with years of missed connections and recent efforts to rebuild. Then Dad stepped forward and wrapped me in a hug so tight it nearly lifted me off the ground. "That was incredible, Grady," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "We are so proud of you." Mom joined the embrace, her tears dampening my shoulder. Amber stood slightly apart, giving us space for this moment that belonged primarily to me and our parents. The conference provided lunchboxes for speakers and their guests. We took ours to a nearby park, sitting awkwardly on a blanket like a family attempting a normal activity for the first time. "We have something to tell you," Mom said as we finished eating. "We've been in therapy individually and as a couple for 8 months now." "I know," I nodded. "We've been doing family therapy together for 6 months." "Yes, but we wanted you to know how seriously we're taking this," Dad continued. "This isn't just about our relationship with you. It's about addressing our own issues that led to the problems in the first place." Mom reached for his hand. We've had to face some difficult truths about ourselves. How I pushed my own unfulfilled dreams onto both of you in different ways. How your father's financial anxiety made him value certain kinds of achievement over others. It's not easy work, Dad admitted, but it's necessary. We don't want to keep making the same mistakes. Their willingness to do the difficult internal work touched me deeply. This wasn't just about appeasing me after public embarrassment. They were genuinely committed to growth and change. The conversation shifted to Amber, who excitedly shared details about her upcoming freshman year at Boston University. "I'm majoring in psychology," she announced. "I want to understand how family dynamics affect individual development." I laughed. "I wonder where you got that interest." "Living it provides excellent research material," she replied with a grin. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the park, I realized this was the longest, most honest conversation I'd ever had with my family. No one was performing or pretending. We were just four flawed people trying to understand and connect with each other. Before returning to the conference for afternoon sessions, we took a photo together, my first family photo in years. Looking at our smiling faces on my phone screen, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not the triumph of having won my parents' attention, but the simple contentment of being known and accepted. 1 year later, I returned to Harvard as a guest lecturer in Professor Williams' Advanced Economics Seminar. Foster Technologies had promoted me to lead our new education division, where I directed initiatives to support first-generation college students and others lacking traditional family support. I'd established a scholarship specifically for students whose achievements went uncelebrated at home, providing not just financial assistance but mentorship and community. The first cohort of 12 students had begun their freshman year with resources I wished I'd had. My parents attended my lecture, sitting in the front row with visible pride. Afterward, Professor Williams pulled me aside. "I nominated you for our Distinguished Young Alumni teaching position," he confided. "The committee was quite impressed with your application." "Teaching position? I never applied for any position." He smiled enigmatically. "Sometimes opportunities find us when we're ready for them." The full circle moment wasn't lost on me, from unseen student to celebrated educator in the same hallowed halls. As we walked across Harvard Yard, now ordinary rather than mythic in my eyes, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed since that fateful graduation day. The viral speech had opened doors, but the harder, quieter work of personal growth and family reconciliation had built the foundation that allowed me to walk through those doors whole. My parents weren't perfect. They still occasionally slipped into old patterns of thinking, but they were trying consistently, and that effort mattered more than perfection. Our monthly family video calls had become a touchstone rather than an obligation. Amber thrived at Boston University, discovering academic passions she never knew existed during her skating years. My parents had found financial stability again, and were slowly rebuilding their retirement savings. The journey from that text message, "We're too tired from your sister's trip to attend your graduation," to where we stood now, wasn't a fairy tale transformation. It was messy, inconsistent, and occasionally painful. But it was real. The empty seats at my graduation had ultimately led me to my purpose, helping others find their voice and creating support systems for those whose achievements went uncelebrated. The disappointment that once defined me had become merely one chapter in a much larger story. Standing there in Harvard Yard with my parents and Professor Williams, I finally understood the most important lesson of my journey. True resilience isn't about never falling or never being hurt. It's about how we rise, how we heal, and how we help others do the same. The validation I once desperately sought from my parents now came from within, supplemented by the community I'd built around me: mentors, colleagues, friends, and yes, even family. I had learned that disappointment, when faced with honesty and courage, can become a catalyst for an authentic life that helps others. And that, perhaps, was the greatest achievement of all. Have you ever had to make peace with family disappointment? Comment below and share your experience of finding strength when those who should support you didn't show up. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' recognition. Like, subscribe, and share this story if it resonated with you or might help someone who needs to hear that they aren't alone in their journey. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to speak your truth and find your chosen family, wherever they might be.